Welcome to the Multifamily Zone, where business meets family. We explore what the entrepreneur life looks like from the family perspective. Now here are your hosts, Julia and Gino Barbaro.
Hey everyone, this is Julia Barbaro, host of the Multifamily Zone podcast. I'm here with my co-host, my husband, and the co-founder of Jake and Gino, Gino Barbaro. Hey Gino.
Hey Joel.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. You had a busy week?
We did. What are we talking about today?
Today I wanted to talk about boundaries. And when we think about boundaries, we could think a lot of people have different thoughts about them. We kind of think about a circle around us, keeping everyone out. But sometimes we forget about when we step into someone else's boundary. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
So let's talk about a little bit, like we'll talk about marriage, we'll talk about the kids, we'll talk about business. So in marriage, how am I letting you as my husband grow? And the story that I have, it's a good ending, I promise. The story I have is early in the day of Jake and Gino, I would help my husband out a lot with the computer work. Now, I didn't know much about it, but I always figured it out, and he knew that. So he would, say, could you help me with this? And I never once said no, because I could do it and I was fine with it. But I never really allowed him to figure it out for himself. And so I was kind of taking away that responsibility for him. And so one day I said, I won't be able to do it, whether I had a baby or whatever it was. And I watched him struggle, and it was really hard.
And I hated it, man. I hate it to this day. I hated it. So it's like one of those things where I need to make money and I need to make it happen. So I'm like, I have to figure it out. It's one of those things that are just painful. And if it's painful enough and you're uncomfortable enough, you need to do it. Unfortunately, you have to learn it.
Yeah. So the point there was that I allowed him to figure it out and to be responsible and take care of it and learn it. So then now he can hire someone and have them do it. And so that's just a little lesson for me, that we do that a lot with each other, especially our loved ones, our close people that we have, like our kids, that we take on all their responsibilities thinking we're helping. But in the long run, how are we letting them be responsible and learn?
And I don't fall into the trap of I can do it better, I can do it quicker, because you can obviously do it better. You can cook dinner better than a 13-year-old or make an omelet. But I had an awesome omelet this morning for my daughter, and she would not have been able to do it. She's going to be 11 years old. She would not have been able to do that if we didn't have to struggle with her and teach her how to do it and take the pan away from her and let them figure it out. It's all about letting our children figure it out, helping them, teaching them, but letting them do it. And it's one of those things that are boundaries. I can make an omelet quicker. I can probably do it better in the beginning, but you just have to trust in the process and let them figure it out.
Yeah. So the question we always have to ask is in a relationship is when am I stepping over my boundary and stepping into somebody else's and allowing myself to take over and try to control that person and then control what they're trying to do and try to learn. And then another thing too, in a marriage, sometimes we forget the other people around us, let's say our in-laws or whoever. And let's just say, for an example, our mother-in-law comes over unexpectedly every week, and it really bothers the wife. And she says, to the husband, I would really appreciate it if you, can we figure another way? I don't want to insult the mother. Okay, great. But where are our boundaries, in a sense, as a family, as a married couple? Why isn't it that we're so uncomfortable to insult somebody, but yet we take the person so close to us and we don't see them and we don't see what they're upset about? Does that make sense?
It does.
So why can't we just say to the mother-in-law or whoever, I would appreciate if you give us a call beforehand. We might be in the middle of something, the kids and all, to create our family boundaries. Why are you smiling?
I know you're not talking about my mom.
I'm not, actually. My mom doesn't do that.
My mom doesn't do that. But I thought I was in a unique situation that, as I was growing up, my mom was great. My mom was fantastic. And, as being an Italian, she was controlling. And I thought that was just unique to Italians families, but I see that that happens in a lot of families, whether they're Middle Eastern, whether they're Hispanic, whatever family you're from. It seems like a lot of the times the mom wants to be controlling, not in a bad way, but just the way we grew up. I had an intimate relationship because I was also in business with her. I saw her every day. So she, you know, we were always all the time. So when it was time for me to leave the restaurant, the thought of abandoning her was like death to me. It was like really torturous. And when I ultimately did leave the restaurant, I was still getting phone calls saying, you know, you're not really working, are you? You want to come over and give us a hand? And there was really no boundaries. It was very difficult. So
how did you make boundaries there? What did you do?
I left. Ultimately, I decided to say to myself,
what could you have done differently if you didn't have that chance to leave?
I mean, it was a hard situation because, you know, my mom is a little bit older. She was working at the restaurant, working tough hours. I was there for the whole time. And all of a sudden I just decided to pick up and leave. They didn't understand quite what I was doing for a living. They thought I was just on the phone having fun. I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know what I could have done differently. I think I just needed a little separation. I think.
Well, let me ask you, what if you sat with your mother and actually talked to her and say, listen, this is what I'm doing. I would appreciate if you would respect that. Did you ever do that? Or could that have worked?
It might have worked a little bit, but still, when she goes away and went away on vacation, can you hop in and just check on things? Because I was literally 5 minutes from the restaurant. So as the oldest son, feeling that kind of, what's the word? I felt
obligated.
Yeah, obligated, but it was also like, oh man, I can't say no to her because my thing is, my mom was always there for me. Whatever I needed something, she never said no to me. So saying no to her in those situations was hard because she never said no to me. So I felt like I was turning my back on her, when in reality, I don't think I was, because I needed to lead my own life. I was actually getting separation from the restaurant. I was going on a new journey, and it was hard for them to say goodbye to me, and it was hard for me to put up the boundary. So I don't know what the best way was. For me, ultimately, just leaving and starting fresh and having a boundary. Mm-hmm. And it took my mom a couple of years to get over that. Yeah. It really did. Time heals everything. It really does. But
I sometimes think, and I wonder, is if you did have a true conversation and said, and laid out your boundaries and importance, and as a family of, you know, myself and the kids, and say, you know, this is our life now. We did leave the restaurant, and I would appreciate it if you would respect that. I think she might have a different view of it.
I can't go back. Hindsight is 20/20.
No, I know that. I'm just wondering for the people listening in that similar situation. Sometimes we forget to have a conversation.
Communication is the biggest downfall of every entity, whether you're a corporation, whether you're a family, whether it's friends, whatever it is, whatever entity you're dealing with. If you can't communicate properly, right, and you can't talk about it. And it's funny because I really couldn't talk to my mom because she didn't know I had property in Tennessee until I was ready to retire, because I had done it once. And this is what I tell a lot of my students: if people aren't going to support you in what you're doing, and they're going to be negative with you, it's always sometimes better not to say anything, not to tell them what your aspirations or what your goals are or what you're trying to accomplish, because they're not trying to hurt you, but they're trying to protect you in their own way. So my mom, the first time she found out that I was, investing in Rochester, it was over 10 years ago. First thing she said to me is, "You've got 6 mouths to feed. Isn't that risky?" I mean, everything's risky. Going to work is risky. Having an employer is risky. Having a small business is risky. I was just trying to do something better. So I never communicated with her. That's why ultimately maybe I just couldn't tell her when I left that I was doing something different. And I couldn't think of that.
That actually goes along with, when I think of boundaries, I think more of, we can't control other people. We can control ourselves. What we can control is what we let them get away with. In a sense where, if someone's, let's say, I don't know, you have an appointment at 2 p.m., the person's late, and it's kind of an always thing. They're always late. They're always making excuses. And our reaction is, oh, don't worry about it. They're going to keep doing that. But if we change our reaction to, and say something like, I would appreciate, for the remaining meetings that you're on time. I do have other responsibilities, commitments that I have to get to, and be, straight to the point, very polite, and not say, it's okay, don't worry about it. I wonder what will change after. because a lot of the times we let people act the way they do toward us. And I'm not saying it's our fault, but we allow it. Would you say?
Our actions are supposed to have consequences. That's what we teach our kids, right? If you're late to a meeting, you're late to something, you should be penalized by that. I mean, if you're in school and you're late to a class, you're going to get written up, or you're not going to be allowed to get into the class.
Yeah.
And if you're late to a business meeting, unless you have some viable excuse, you really shouldn't be allowed to be late, because everyone's time is worth something. So to me, that's a really tough one to me, because you're not valuing somebody's time,
right,
and you're not respecting them, right? And that's what it is. Down here, down south, unfortunately, people move a little bit slower. So if you have a 1 o'clock appointment, they'll stroll in 5 after. I was telling my wife this morning, I went to the dentist's office about 6 months ago. It was 8:02. I'm rushing to get in there. I get in there. I have an 8 o'clock appointment. This receptionist hadn't even walked in yet.
Yeah.
So she walked in 5 minutes after me. So I'm thinking to myself,
right,
okay, that's how it goes down here. But
yes,
I
but
don't
you also
want
feel like your time is not valued.
That's right.
Because you have other responsibilities. So I think that it's important that we start paying attention to that and saying, okay, how can I reword this where it's super polite and respectful, but to the point, and make the other person understand that that our time is valuable, you know? But what happens if we're the one that's always late? Then what? What happens if we're the ones that are constantly running late? Sorry, I'm late. I had this, and this, and it's just our life. Like, we all know those people that can never make it to your house on time. They could never make that appointment on time. They're always late. So what is that? What's behind that? And I always wonder, and I always talk to people about that. When are you on time? Because some of us are on time to certain things, but not to others. So I always like to ask, what are you on time for? And is it somewhere that you want to go? And when you're late, do you not want to go? Are you, is it somewhere that you have to go where it's difficult to be there, or you don't want to, be around certain people, so you're late purposely? Because a lot of us never actually think about why we're late. So that's something that, I like to think about for the week, is like, when we're late to something, what's the reason? And how can we change that?
How can we change that? Basically, I said it in a show earlier this week. I think ultimately we all have to be responsible for our lives and for our actions. I said earlier, life isn't fair. I was in a restaurant for 20 years. I'm carbohydrate intolerant. I can't eat pasta and pizza, and I was around that for my whole life. That's not fair.
It's not fair.
Life isn't fair. You need to be responsible for your actions. You need to understand what you're doing in your life. If you're constantly late, that means you're not disciplined. That means you don't have a good habit, and that means you're going to really piss a lot of people off. So you're going to lose a lot of opportunities. So become conscious, become aware of what your actions are, of what you're doing in your life, how you're affecting others. And the next time you're late, really think about it. I didn't respect my wife's time. I was late to this podcast because I had another thing. I was making an excuse, but I didn't respect her time for 15 or 20 minutes. I had a good excuse for it, though. At least I think I did, right? She's okay with it. But I'm being honest. Assess what's going on in your life. Why are you late? As far as your boundaries, what I would say is, if somebody's constantly late to your thing and you're not respecting it, just say, next time you're late, I'm going to shut off the meeting or whatever, and I'm just not.
But again, it's how we put it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can be firm about it
Yes,
too. We have an appointment at 2.
Right.
My next appointment's at 2:30. If you don't show up by 5 after, I have to prepare for my next appointment. That's what I think. You have to be firm with it. And it's the same thing with your children. I think you have to lay ground rules and lay out outlines and stick to them, and don't waver from them. Right.
So let's talk about a little bit about, having a company or working and keeping those boundaries. And again, not passing the responsibility over to someone else, because, like we talked about before, we could do it better. And I just want to know, because when I think about this, I think about you in the restaurant. And so tell me how you could have let go of certain jobs or certain tasks and allowed another person to do it. And if you did that, what benefits would have come from it?
So this is what Jake and I call the I'm a mentality. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and Ima gets burned out. But unfortunately, to become a successful person in life, you need to learn a lot of those skills and a lot of those responsibilities, and to work hard. But there comes a point in your professional career, whether you're a business, whether you're working for somebody, for you to start scaling up and to get bigger and to hire more responsibilities, you need to start delegating those low-level tasks off to somebody else. And it's really hard, that those boundaries that Julia is talking about, to really let go of that, because you're good at it, but always look and designate it what your highest generating revenue is. Is it really washing dishes? Is it really sweeping the floor? I can't find somebody. Well, you do find somebody, or you pay somebody more to do that, because that's not where my value was. So it was very hard for me to let go. It was very hard for me to pay other people to do what I thought was important, where I was good at. Maybe my ego got involved a little bit. I didn't want to give up that responsibility. If I had done that and worked on the business, instead of, working in it and working on it, I had started doing that with Gino's family. I had started wrote a cookbook, was doing physical products, was really creating the brand. I could have accelerated that a lot quicker, and I could have made that little brick and mortar store into maybe another franchisable model, or created a food truck, or done more and created different revenue streams of revenue. I would have been able to do that if I would have been able to delegate those responsibilities. But you all have to go through that in life and figure out where you are in life, and say to yourselves, you know what? Once I'm done with these low levels, I need to outsource them. Even like with bookkeeping, it took me forever to get a bookkeeper to do that kind of work. I love to work in QuickBooks. It was one night I was up till 4 a.m. trying to figure it out. And then I would say to myself, this is like $25 or $30 an hour work, which I can be subbing out. I mean, it's everything, boundaries. Okay, washing the cars. I'm having the kids wash the cars now. Cutting the grass. Somebody else can cut the grass. You're dry cleaning. Somebody else can do dry cleaning. I'm having my kids do it now. I'm having them pay for it. All those little tasks that are time wasters, they add up at the end of the day. If you can reclaim 30 minutes or an hour or more of a day, that's 7 hours a week. You can read a book in 7 hours. You can have 50 books read at the end of the year. You can become an expert in what you want to do. And more importantly, you can really figure out what you like to do and focus on that, because maybe you're doing a lot of these tasks. I didn't like to do a lot of those tasks that I was doing. I could have been focusing more on what I like, which was creating content, shooting videos, planting the garden, doing some business development, instead of being stuck in the kitchen.
Yeah, and we also forget too that people in our business or in our family, they are capable of learning these things, like Gino was saying, and we don't allow them to do it because, whether it's like he said before, we could do it better or whatever it is, allow them to be able to make mistakes and to learn, and even if it's in a company setting, let's say someone's constantly asking you for favors during work, and you're doing it not to upset them or, to make their life easier, or because you like them or you want to help them out. So now you're avoiding your responsibilities, right? To help them. You're doing yours poorly to help them. But meanwhile, we're not allowing them to be responsible. So we're actually taking away from them.
So in the business world, start slowly. Start with a virtual assistant. You can get a really good virtual assistant for $8 an hour. I mean, that's like paying them really good. Start doing them, letting them do low-level tasks. I hate posting on social media. So I have my virtual assistant posts on social media daily. I have them help them creating us content, short-form content as far as videos go. Start doing that. Start outsourcing the bookkeeping. Maybe you can do 5 hours a week or 3 hours a week with the bookkeeper. Let them start doing it. Start delegating it. And I know that the hardest thing for an entrepreneur is, when do I start hiring, or when do I hire the next person? That's basically on faith. We just onboarded an operations manager a month ago. Were we making enough money to do it? Probably, but I had been holding off. And then when you hire it, you're going to say to yourself, I should have done this 6 months ago. You don't know until you know. If you're at that point where you want to start scaling up and start adding pieces, just take the leap of faith, because what's the worst thing that can happen? You have somebody on for 3 or 6 months, you pay them extra, it doesn't work out, you can always let them go. But I will guarantee you one thing, you will be able to focus on things that you're not generating revenue. So that's the key element there. If you're doing tasks that are low level that somebody else can do, and you could be focusing your time on onboarding more students, underwriting more deals, looking at more deals, raising money, writing a book, whatever it is that's going to generate the money. Those are the tasks that the entrepreneur or the visionary or the integrator should be focusing on, not those lower level tasks. Right. So hire somebody else to do that.
Right. So what are you saying yes to, and what are you saying no to? And that's something that we have to think about, because even in our everyday life of just living, for me at home, what am I taking on during the day that I can actually outsource it? Like he said, am I spending the whole entire day cleaning the house, or can I get someone to help me out even once a month to do the basic cleaning when at that point I could do something else productive with my kids, with my husband somewhere, so what are we saying yes and no to?
And that's important, because when you do say yes to something, that means you're saying no to something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like with work, when you're in the business world, you're saying, yes, I'm going to get this, invoice paid. You're saying no to a possible podcast recording or writing another 2 pages in your book. So weigh that out. The only way you get over that is really creating like my wife likes to say, creating a schedule. Put it in the schedule. Create a calendar of what you need to do for the week. Start seeing where you can start reclaiming some of that time and using that time and time blocking it off.
Mm-hmm. So good. So that's it. So that's my question to everyone is, what are their boundaries and when are we stepping over ours into someone else's? And that's something that we have to be honest about, because a lot of the times we pretend like, no, we're not doing that. But meanwhile, it's so obvious. So, talk to someone, talk to your spouse, talk to your kids, ask them what they want to start trying, what they want to start doing. If they want to start cleaning or cooking with you, what if you let them? What if you let them make mistakes, make a mess, whatever? It all gets cleaned up. It all gets done in the end. But that's a good question that we have to ask ourselves.
And as far as, I guess, the business world, I'm trying to think about boundaries in the business world. When you're starting a company, it's going to be hard because you've got to do a lot of it yourself. But as you see, pick out what you like to do, where your strong suits are and where you can make money for the company, and then start trying to outsource and getting other people who like to do. There are people out there who like to clean. There are people out there who like to do accounting. There are people out there who like to wash cars. Try to find out who those people are and employ those people to help you. And that was the biggest, one of the biggest aha moments for me was once I started, outsourcing and started growing. I had one restaurant for 25 years and I've got almost 1,500 apartment units in 6 years. So it took a long time for me to figure that out. But once you figure it out, it'll be liberating to you, because you can start focusing on what you really like to do and what your strong suit is.
Awesome.
Bring us home, Joel.
All right. No, that was great. I just want to thank everyone for listening. And if there's any recommendations on what you want to hear in this podcast, we would love to know. And
also, give me your thoughts on what boundaries are. What are you struggling with boundaries? If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below in the show notes. I love to hear them, because I think setting boundaries is going to be really good for you long term. It's going to really be healthy for you long term. And in the family, it's also important to actually have that conversation that we talked about, and to be open with your spouse and with your kids and to talk about it. And if there's something, outside of the family that's been, eating away at you, it's maybe time to talk about that. So we just want to thank you again for listening. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and have a great week, everybody. Thanks, everyone.